and then you can take over.
Okay, thanks, Julie. So today we're going to talk specifically about the mini lesson. And so first of all, we felt like the Jamboard was really successful, and we want to know, what do you know about the mini lessons in Writers Workshop, or even just mini lessons in general? What are your thoughts? What do you know? What are you wondering? So Julie's going to put the link to the Jamboard in the chat again. And so for those of you that weren't here last time, or yesterday rather, so the idea with the Jamboard is that you're going to grab a sticky note, which is going to be on your left hand column right under the cursor symbol, and then you're going to write your ideas down, save, and then you can move them around to where you would like to go. So we're going to give you a couple minutes just to get a couple of your ideas or thoughts. What do you know about mini lessons? What are you wondering about mini lessons?
We discovered this tool a few weeks ago, and we have worked with teachers who use it with their students, and it has worked very, very well. This is a nice way to get students to collaborate together. It's part of the Google Suite, so when you click on your name on that waffle, when you go down below, I think most of the time it's down on that second page, you will see that Jamboard icon. Pretty easy to use as a tool.
Oh, somebody already knows the seed and watermelon story.
As well, for the new people who are joining us, what we ask you to do at the beginning of the session is, once you're done the Jamboard, maybe go on the participant next to your name. Let us know if you already have used the Writers Workshop, the units of study of Lucy Calkins, by giving us the green check for yes or the red X for no, just to give us an idea of who's familiar with this resource.
Okay, we'll give you one more minute.
Not many wanderings, lots of stuff that people already know.
Sounds like you guys know a lot, which is awesome.
Differentiation. So there's one comment about that differentiation, so that every child can feel successful from the beginning. Yeah, this is something that will be addressed mainly when you do that conferring one-on-one.
Yeah.
And in the moment based,
yeah. And then ways to keep them engaging and not repetitive. We'll talk a little bit about that. And it is one mini lesson a day. There will be a mid-workshop teach that you can use. That'll also kind of give you a pointer to keep with your teaching point, but it's going to be one mini lesson per workshop session. Okay, so we are going to get back into our PowerPoint. So Julie is going to kind of keep track of some of the wonderings, and we're either going to address them as we go, or we can answer them in the email.
So feel free to ask any question in the chat box. I'm on it.
So just a quick review of what we talked about yesterday. If you weren't here, we're going to talk about what the entire cycle of workshop looks like. So today we're going to focus on this one little pie piece, which is the mini lesson. This is going to be 10 minutes of your entire period of workshop. Students can write then, so it's going to be independent writing. And this is when you're going to be doing your conferring, your small group work, one-to-one if appropriate. And so it says students write up to 40 minutes. We know that especially in a primary setting, that might not be realistic, as well as this is limited as well to what your time blocks are within your school day. Mini lesson, independent writing time, and there's going to be some partner work, so some targeted partner work with specific partnerships that you've chosen. And then there's always going to be a share at the end. So it's generally the teacher is going to share or highlight a couple of things that she's noticed some of the writers within the class using. So when we look at the actual mini lesson, and when we look at in the units of study book what the lessons look like, we're going to talk about each part of the mini lesson. So there's a few different components. And so what we want to do is we kind of want to show you what each of them are, so that when you do go, whether it be in the fall or whenever you decide to delve into Writers Workshop, when you see those kind of headers, you know exactly what's going on. So the first piece is your connection, and your connection is only going to take about 1 minute of your 10 minutes. This is when the students are going to be brought together. This is when you kind of want to create a little bit more intimacy and feeling within your workshop. So one of the reasons that we have students gather is so that everybody can kind of feel together, and it feels like the teacher is talking to each and every student. So a lot of the lesson components you'll see are based off of personal stories or examples that students can connect with. So it's going to teach the ongoing work that the students have been doing. So you'll see in my demonstration today, I'm going to just refer back maybe to something that we had talked about in the previous lesson, maybe referring to the anchor charts, a little refresher. And then from there, it's going to lead you into the teaching point. And the teaching point is always going to be very clear and concise, and it's going to be clearly labeled within your lesson. So an introduction, a way to kind of connect back from before, moving into the teaching point. 1 minute tops.
One thing that I'm just adding in the comment was that connection, if you don't like what's the connection that's given in the books, feel free to change it to something, to one of your story that it sounds authentic. I always give that example of the grade 3 unit that refers to cockroaches. Our students don't connect to that, so feel free to change that.
Now is kind of your meat and potatoes. So this is your teaching component, your teaching piece. And so in here is when you are going to connect the teaching point with how it's going to look for them. In this, you're going to look and you're going to see the use of mentor text to show them what that teaching point looks like in a piece of writing, or you're going to be teaching them live and you're going to be writing live in front of them. And so this is how you're going to get the teaching point across to the students. I think that this will be really obvious to you today on how you see this. And as Julie said again, if the examples, because what you'll see is that the lessons are quite scripted. And what I had said yesterday was the reason for those, because I asked them, was they're for a first-year teacher or a 25-year veteran. So the language and the conversations and the examples are in there to support you in getting that teaching point across. And so you'll see in my example today, in my teaching piece, I used a completely different example than what was in there. So I made it my own for what made sense in the specific situation. Then the next piece is active engagement, and active engagement is the guided practice. So the teaching is the I do, there's going to be some we do, getting some opinions, and then the active engagement is your kind of second we do piece, and this is when they're going to be working with their partner. So an example would be, well, first of all, thumbs up if you understand what I'm saying. Getting some feedback from the students, and then you're going to have them turn to their partners and they're going to practice that teaching point in a little kind of situation. So think of a story, tell your partner what specifically you would write about as an example. So having them practice that skill that you've just taught them through the teaching point.
But that active engagement is super powerful for your reluctant writer, because that's when they're starting to formulate the ideas of what they're going to write. They're starting to verbalize those ideas with a partner. You as the teacher, when you give that active engagement, what I've been doing that was super helpful was because they're all gathered at the carpet, I walk around with my Post-it and I listen to what I'm hearing. That's my quick formative assessment, that if I hear Adam, who's totally off track, which sadly often happens with Adam Turner, kidding. But if I hear that he's totally off track, then I'm making a note of it. So I know that after, when kids are sent on their own, he's going to be one of my first students that I'm going to touch base.
So your final piece within your mini lesson is the link. And the link is, how are you linking that teaching point and that lesson of today into their writing? And what is that going to look like? So you're going to summarize the mini lesson or the teaching point in a way that the students are going to be able to take it with them and go right into their books and start writing about and using that teaching point or that skill that you've taught them today. And you also kind of want to think about how is that going to look, and giving examples within your active engagement, which will lead you to the link. which again, you will see. Okay, so what we wanted to do is show you this kind of, it looks like a bit of a hot mess, but what's important here is that we want to kind of show you, because when you open the lessons, you're going to see a lot of things. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to show you some things that you might see and what they mean. So the first thing is, here's your mini lesson, the title of your mini lesson. This is a higher level mini lesson, but just we're just talking about the components. Here are your headers. So connection. Your teaching point is always going to have this little flower icon around it. And then you get into your teaching section. If we were to flip the page, it would be the active engagement, and then finally the link. Again, it's very scripted with examples. We will go through an example today so I can show you. But what, if anything, our first piece of advice is always stick to the bold. So here's what you're doing. You're going to tell students that you already know a lot about them as writers and remind them that they already know a lot about writing. There's your kind of your introduction connection. Here's your teaching point. Here's kind of the big ideas. And you'll see the teaching will go into the next page as well. And you'll always see there'll be like a debrief. Like, here are the big things that you want to take away. If you want to read through the script and use that as an example, you can. If you want to read through the script and say, I think I have a more relevant example, you can do that. On the left-hand side, beside the first page of the mini lesson, you're going to see the getting ready piece. So this is going to show you things that you need to have prepared for the lesson. So for example, you're going to need maybe a entry from your own writer's notebook. So you're going to have a little piece of writing that you want to share with them to give them an example through there in this specific piece.
The powerful part of this, Lauren, that I want to mention is once you registered your resource online, it's super easy. When you go into your Heinemann resource online, then it says lesson 1, and you've got all your PDF, all the stuff that you may need to print or show under your DocCam for that lesson. So that's a quick way to get ready, accessing your online resources.
Yeah, and so like in today, you'll see sometimes it'll say like you need this anchor chart, things like that. And now the coaching piece, the coaching tips are, they are what it is. It's their coaching tips. So they're going to give you a few more ideas on ways to make that lesson more effective. So again, an example, and I can show you when I go through the planning with you today for the connection piece on the lesson that I'm about to demonstrate, is an example would be like, well, instead of using Jessica's example, you might want to use your own example. And so I took that coaching piece and I actually am going to use that in my own lesson today. And I'll also talk about how sometimes, like another coaching tip, for example, would be, and I know that this came up yesterday, is like everybody wants to write about what my example was, right? So it'll give you little tips and tricks on how to kind of get through all of that. If you have any questions, comments, please put them in the chat. I feel like we kind of powered through this first part because we really want to spend most of the time demonstrating and deconstructing the planning. So Julie will pipe in if there's anything specific. Okay, so what I'm going to do, and I think that the most effective thing that we can do right now is I'm going to demonstrate and I'm going to model a lesson for you. So I'm going to do it live. I'm going to show you, once I've gone through the lesson, I'm going to debrief a little bit with you, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what my planning looked like to get to this point. So before we get started, because I'm doing lesson 5 from Unit 1, Grade 1. And somebody already talked about the watermelon and the seed. This is kind of one of their signature lessons in Writer's Workshop that I'm going to highlight for you today. But because I'm going into lesson 5, I just need to give you a little bit of a background. So we will be talking about mentor text, and I know that it's been lightly talked about before. One of the big things in Writer's Workshop is using mentor text. So we're going to use mentor text and authors as our mentors on things that we can kind of put into our own writing. And so yesterday in the lesson, the students would have read the book Night of the Veggie Monster. Now the big idea with this book is that it's about a child who every Tuesday night dreads dinner time because he has to eat peas. And he goes into great detail about his parents have no idea how the peas make him feel and how he's just pretty much repulsed by these peas. And there's also commentary between the parents. So things like, I squirm in my seat, but you know, the power of the P is too strong, right? And what happens with the student. And so just as a little bit of background, because I'm going to be referring to this book, or I'm going to be referring specifically to George McClements in my lesson today. Okay, so just to make sure I'm ahead of the game, I'm just going to share my screen with you now, right before I get started. So if you give me just one.
You may have some question. Lauren is going to show you how to do it now in a virtual environment. Jody this morning for our group from 5 to 8 also showed how to do this. So there's different ways, especially not knowing what kind of setting we'll be teaching in September. We've got lots of different ideas on how to do this, either in a face-to-face, but having the kids all at some distance in the class, or doing it virtually. So you can stay after the session. We'll be on if you want to brainstorm with us. Yes, the mentor text should be with your kits. If they're not, have a look in the schools, but they came in the box.
Okay, so everybody should be able to see my
Julie,
screen.
Sorry, Jody?
I was just gonna say if the mentor, sometimes they're online and not like a paper, like a book copy. Like sometimes the mentors that they're using are examples that have been provided from Heinemann, and those are just PDFs that you'd be able to access when you're online.
Mm-hmm. From all the way to grade 4, most of them are books though, but you're right, Jody, for the higher level, it's different.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's good. That's good.
Okay, I'm gonna get started right now. I'm gonna be referring to you as writers. I'm gonna be talking as if you are my class. So, you know, writers, today I've been thinking about some of the stories you're coming up with. And some of them are great big topics, like school or your life. But these are really, really heavy, hard topics to write about. Now, I've had this problem too. What happened in my own writing is that I had something I wanted to talk about, and I had written one whole page, and I still hadn't got to the good part. Do you sometimes feel like you have so much to write and you have to tell everything? Give me a thumbs up if you ever feel like that. You have too much to write. Now, today, writers, I want to teach you, instead of writing about big topics, we call these watermelon topics. They're huge and they're heavy and they're hard to carry like a watermelon. What we want to do is we want to talk about little teeny tiny seeds, one seed from that big watermelon. So instead of writing about big watermelon topics, writers write about teeny tiny seeds as stories. And these seeds are found inside of our big watermelons. Now, I'm pretty sure, thinking about George McClements when he wrote the Veggie Monster book that we read yesterday, he probably had some really big watermelon topics. And so when he was thinking of an idea, which we talked about in our anchor chart on how to write a story, he probably had a really, really big watermelon to start. Now, what he did is he had to focus in, he had to sit down, and he had to think about some things he could write about. And he could have started with stories that were watermelons, like a vacation, or going out and eating with his family, what mealtime looks like. But you know what? I think that he needed, because he's a really good writer, he came and he decided to talk about one teeny tiny seed, which was, it's actually about his son and the peas, when he has to eat peas at dinner time. So that's a really, really tiny seed. Now, great story writers, they don't use big topics. They use teeny tiny seed stories. Now, what I think that we need to do is we need to take a lesson from George McClements and we need to see if we can make our own seed stories. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to think of a topic that I know is probably a big watermelon topic, but something I want to talk about. So I'm going to talk about our family's dog, one of our family's dogs, and his name is Bo. So if I wanted to write and think of some things that I would say about Bo, I would say that our dog Bo, he's pretty goofy. He's a goofy dog. Another thing that I might say about Bo is that he likes to play hide and go seek with my daughter Georgia. And another thing about Bo is he cries when we leave the house. And when I say cries, he cries. And then another thing, whenever I think about something funny about Bo being a bit of a goof, is when he locked us out of the house. Now, if I wrote all about Bo being a watermelon topic, my story might sound a little bit like this. So our dog, Bo, he's pretty goofy. That's one seed. Our dog, Bo, he likes to play hide and go seek. He hates it when we leave the house. He once locked us outside. So see how if I were to write that as a story, it would sound like a list, when really each of those little pieces of our dog Bo are really watermelon seeds. And so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to pick a teeny tiny seed story. And now the one that makes me laugh all of the time is when our dog Bo locked us out of the house. So I want to think, how might my story begin? If I started by saying our goofy dog Bo, no, because goofy is not my seed. My seed is about when the door locked. So I thought about what I could do, and here's what I decided to write. I heard a loud scratching sound coming from inside the house. I turned to see our puppy, Bo, standing at the window of our front door when I heard the click of the door locking. So do you see how I started? I didn't even start with talking about who Bo is as a dog. I went right to my seed and talking about when the first moment I realized that he had locked us out of the house. And that is a true story. Now, did you see how I made my big watermelon topic about Bo really, really small? And I talked about one piece of Bo, which was he locked us out. Now, when I want to think about writing, going back to our anchor chart, when we talked about our planning piece and we talked about touch and tell and then sketching across the pages, what I would do in this sense is I would touch my paper and I would talk about what I wanted to say about Bo. I could draw a picture about Bo, and then I would get writing. And this is something that you can do too. So what I want you to do right now, writers, is I want you to think of another seed story using the same watermelon topic that I used. Now, I understand that not everybody has a dog, and you might not even have a pet, but I think that you might know a story about an animal. So I'm going to ask you right now, I want you to think of a story of one of your pets or something funny you saw an animal do. This could even be an animal at the zoo. So I want you to give me a thumbs up when you get the seed story in your head. Now, I want you to think about your seed story. I want you to think about how your story would go. I want you to touch and tell. What would the first part say? Does it really fit in with that seed? Think about what would happen next. Pretend you had 3 pages in front of you. What are some things that you would want to talk about with your seed story? And then, so this is when, if I just take a pause, this is when I would go around, and this is a really good time to do a little bit of kind of some formative assessment to see where our students are at. So if I walk around and I heard a student talking about their entire day at the zoo, I know that they don't quite have that seed idea yet. And then after they're working and thinking, and having them work in partnerships as well. So the next step here is when you'll see I'll have them do partner work. You want to highlight a student who's doing it really, really well. And sometimes you might need to embellish a little bit. And so you'll see that next. So I'm gonna get back into my lesson. So when I was walking around, writers, and I was listening to you, I heard Julie come up with a really good seed story, and she was working really hard on making sure she kept with one seed. She was talking about when she was at the zoo, she saw the hippos getting their teeth brushed. What a great seed story. I'm excited to see what Julie's writing is gonna be. Okay, so now, if we think about something like, we're gonna practice some other seed stories. So I'm gonna come up with, my idea is playing with a friend. Do you think that that's a watermelon topic or a seed topic? That's right, that's definitely a watermelon topic. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to think of a seed story that involves playing with a friend. I want you to give me a thumbs up when you have one. Okay, so now let's try one more. Things you like to do in summer. Is that a watermelon or is that a seed? That's right, that's a big watermelon thing. So I want you to think of what is one thing, one tiny seed about summer that you really like to do. Give me a thumbs up when you're ready. And you can tell your partner.
If you're using Zoom with your class, you could use the breakout room now for that quick turn and talk.
Okay, writers, so I want to remind you that when we are writers, when we write narrative fiction, we want to always pause and think. Is this a watermelon topic or is this a seed topic? So anytime we write a story, and if it is a watermelon topic, what is one seed that you can pull from that story? Okay. Now, I want you to write about a seed topic today in your writing, or you can use some of your writing that you had before and maybe make it more of a seed topic. Off you go.
So Lauren, just so you know,
Jody, you're freezing.
Jody is frozen. So I timed that lesson and I had it just under 10 minutes. And so like you saw, it's a mini lesson and it's just that. It's quick, it's to the point, kind of repeating some of the important elements. One thing I probably would have done is maybe given a little bit more time for the active engagement, but otherwise, that is an example of what a mini lesson is going to look like.
Can I just give one tip that really helped me? Because sometimes, like as Lauren said, now you'd say off you go, writers, and students would go and be sent at their desk. I have found what was super helpful for me was before I let them go to their desk, at the carpet, I would say, okay, now writers, close your eyes. Once you know exactly what you're going to write about, put your thumbs up. So what I used to do is I would walk around and touch their thumb. And the signal was that when I touch your thumb, then you can go and start writing. And usually what used to happen is that those students, those reluctant writers who were still not clear on what they were going to write, would stay with me at the carpet. So that was a good way to keep the behaviors down, because often these would be the students who would go to their desk and they would go sharpen the pencil and bug any other students because the idea was still not clear in their head. So keeping these students at the end at the carpet was a good way, it was a good tip for class management. And with these kids, I could reinforce and re-explain the teaching point if it wasn't clear. And that almost became my small group strategy that I would start within that 40 minutes of students independent writing.
So your mini lessons out of the gates are not going to be perfect, right? And that's okay. And they're never going to be perfect. So there are things certainly today that I would have changed in my mini lesson. I heard myself hesitating a couple times. I know there's some terminology that I might have changed. giving some more time, but you also need to give yourself permission to be a learner going through this process as well. We as educators, this is like one thing that Julie says all the time as well, is we love to talk. We love to talk. And so give yourself permission to learn and understand and how the lessons are structured. And then what you're going to find over time is that you're really going to kind of hone in on your examples. You're going to hone in on the language you want to use, how you're going to address your class, and then it's going to get a little bit easier rather than looking and using at that script verbatim.
So we're going to give you a few minutes now. Lauren is going to go on slide 14, please. And we're going, like, we want to know, what did you notice about this mini lesson? Were the component obvious, those connection, teach, and just in general, what did you think? So we're going to get you to use the chat box right now. We'll give you 1 or 2 minutes to write any comments, or if you'd like to speak loud, go ahead, turn on your mic and share your comments. Well, oh, okay. I'm starting to see some comments. Lauren, you may want to change the slide. Okay.
What can you see? Does it not say reflection, notice, wonder?
No, we're at connection slide.
What?
I am anyway. I'm not sure. Jody, do you see the connection slide?
Can you see my Google right now?
Good question, M. Dilello. Not sure who that is. When the question is, when they're sent to write independently, should they be using a topic given to them? No, this is the beauty. This is what I love about Writers Workshop. They get to use their own topic. What I love the most about this resource is that if today the lesson that Lauren was teaching was that small seed moment, that teaching point was on this, today as a student, I might be inspired by Minecraft because I was playing Minecraft all night the night before with my brother. So I may start writing a small moment about Minecraft. Tomorrow, when my teacher is going to model another teaching point, I may choose to go back and complete my story about Minecraft, or I may decide to be inspired by totally something else. This is the beauty of it. So that's why in this resource, we suggest to have a folder where students are keeping all their stories, all their beginning. At the end of the unit, students are choosing one story from everything that they've started writing on, and they're publishing it. They're going to embellish it. So yes, they need to have choice. And for some students in that example Lauren gave, like, yes, it was about a pet, but me, I don't have a pet. I actually don't like animals. So I may have gone and say, actually, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about my little brother, right? Like, for an example. So the choice is super important.
Yeah. And so like you'll see momentarily, like the example was your day in the class, but because we're not in a classroom because of COVID, I chose to make my own example out of that lesson. Somebody else said, how I was able to show that when I was struggling with writing, and I will address that when I talk to you about the planning piece, because that was actually a coaching move that was suggested in the lesson, and it wasn't part of the lesson.
Same thing with Kim's comment about how she was taking time to think out loud. This is crucial. This is something that we don't do enough as teachers. Most of our students will get it, but our little struggling writers or readers need that explicit, they need to have access of what's happening in our brain. So that thinking out loud is super, super important.
I'll give you 1 more minute to think.
I think we're good, Lauren.
We're good? Okay.
Don't see any more comments, yep.
So what we're gonna do now is we are going to talk to you about how to plan a mini lesson. Now, the biggest piece of learning that I've had when I was being trained in Writers Workshop was that the planning of a mini lesson should never take longer than the teaching of the lesson itself. So your planning shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. And I think that one of the pieces of feedback that we always get is the lessons are so overwhelming and it takes me so long to plan. And it should not, absolutely should not do that. So what we recommend, and one of the things that we've learned that I want to share with you, is the order in which we plan. So as you know, it goes from connection to the teaching point, the teach, the active engagement, then the link, which we talked about. Not something I expect you to memorize, just so you're aware of what we've talked about just now. However, when you plan the lesson, you want to go into what the heart of the lesson is and start there, and then make it your own and take what you want. So the first thing that we recommend is that if you find the teaching point. And so like I had showed you before, and I'll show you momentarily, there's a little kind of flower or icon that's always going to pull out the teaching point. Some questions you can ask is, how will it go in my own words? And what are the steps that I need to get to the teaching point? And so in terms of how it goes in your own words, if you keep anything the same, I would keep the teaching point the same, because you don't want to go too far off of what exactly you want to teach in that wording that they've given you. When you talk about the teach piece, so you want to ask yourself, what is this going to look like? So for me, when I was planning, for example, I knew that I was going to use my iPad, so I needed to have a couple of things prepared. And what is it going to look like in terms of how I'm talking to the class? Where am I going to do this work? Do I need an anchor chart ready? And also, when you look at your teach section, as well as getting to the teaching point, towards the end of the teach section, before you get to the next section of the lesson, there's always going to be a debrief. And so the debrief is going to give you a really good idea of how you're going to get to that teaching point and what the end goal is. From there, after you've really looked at what you want to teach, it would be a good idea to now plan the link. So are they doing the work of your lesson the entire time, the part of it? So that's when the link is, when you send them off to go do their work. So now, writers, I want you to think of a seed story, or maybe take the story that you've already been writing and see if you can make it smaller into a seed. So you're going to send them, tell them what they're going to do in that writing block, as well as how is that going to look? Do they need to take a new piece of writing? Do you want to take a piece of writing that they had before? Can they start a new story? So what is that going to look like, and what are your instructions going to look like? Because the more specific you are there, the less kind of questions you're going to get back while you're trying to confer. And then it's the active engagement piece. So the active engagement piece is when, and you will have noticed in my lesson, is when I'm having them think about and having them try the skill or the teaching point that I'm trying to teach. And so where are they doing this? Do they need to go somewhere in the room to try it out? Are they going to stay on the carpet? What does it look like? Is it just going to be their own thinking? Are they going to be using partners, partner work? And then finally is when you kind of come up with the connect, which is actually the first part of the lesson. So does this allow my students a bridge to the learning? And so the bridge and the connect that I modeled was thinking about their writing, because we had just learned in the previous lessons, you saw through the anchor chart, is how to write a story. What does it look like? So now I was thinking about their writing, and I wanted to talk about to them about their writing. And I also gave my own personal example, and that's how I connected, and that's how I got them in, and I pulled them into the lesson to start. Okay, so now.
Any questions? Everyone is quite quiet. I don't see many comments, but please feel free to ask away to make any connection. Is connecting the same as a hook? Yeah, kind of. You're making your yes, it is kind of a hook.
Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to plan live for you. I'm going to show you what my brain does while I plan. And I'm going to do that through my iPad. And for simplicity's sake, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to plan the lesson that I just did. So you have a little bit of familiarity of what that's going to look like. Okay, so this is the lesson. Now, this is just a picture of the lesson. So right now I'm in my iPad, and yes, it has been highlighted already. That's just from our prior work with it in the specific lesson. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you what my thoughts are, and you can actually see what's written. And so one of the things that I didn't talk about, and I will talk about right now, is some sort of template that you can use for planning. So we've shared this template with you. So this is a really good way to just, in your own words, make your lesson concise. So this is a format that a lot of teachers like to use. Some teachers as well just like to use sticky notes, and they'll actually physically stick them in the book. I find that I do that a lot because sometimes if I want to power read an example, because I was like, okay, I need another example, then I have the book right with me. So other teachers want this. I've seen teachers tuck this into their book and have both while they're leading through the lesson. So here is where I'm going to do my planning with you today. Now, I'm going to go back to my lesson. And so I'm going to scroll down. Oh, so right here. So right here is where you can see that little icon. I don't know if it has like a proper name, but name the teaching point. So here is the teaching point. So today I want to teach you that instead of writing about big watermelon topics, writers write about teeny tiny seed stories, little stories inside one big topic. And the cool thing is that inside a watermelon topic, there's a zillion tiny, teeny, tiny seeds. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my planning sheet, and I'm going to grab a pen. That's okay. And I'm going to start with my teaching point. So my teaching point is going to be, so instead of writing about big, and I'm just going to use some shorthand, watermelon stories, writers write, oops, about teeny tiny seed stories. And those are found inside watermelons. Okay, so there's my teaching point. I have it just put right to the side. Something I can highlight to make sure I cover. So now I'm going to go back to my story, and I'm going to take a look at what I want to do next. So now I need to look at what am I actually teaching? So this is when you can see it gets pretty heavy, and I think that this is where teachers get a little bit bogged down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my highlighter and I'm just going to pull out some things that I feel are important. So here's the teaching. Tell children that the mentor author probably first thought of a big watermelon topic, then decided to focus on a teeny tiny story. Okay, that's my big idea. Sure, I'm pretty sure that when George McClemens sat down to write, he probably had a big few topics on his mind. So I wanted so George McClemens, I'm going to tie it into my book from yesterday. We're going to not work. Okay. So he had a few big topics. George McClemens. I think of them as watermelon topics. Okay. He probably thought, and so here's some examples that I want to talk about. I'm going to show this with my hands. Showed would be another watermelon topic. So now I'm going to go back to my sheet, and some things that I feel are important are, I'm going to talk about George McClemens. He likely had lots of watermelon ideas. Okay, he needed to think of some seeds though. Okay, so I'm going to go back and I still read. Okay, so he probably thought I could write about my vacation. His hands would show as big. Okay, here he probably knows great writers don't usually know a lot about big watermelon topics. Writers know that inside of any one of these topics there are a zillion little seed stories. Like inside the topic, eating with my family, he could have talked about these things. His writing would have gone on and on with just one sentence about each of those things. Okay, and so I'm going to go back to my mini lesson. So he likely had lots of watermelon ideas. He needed to think of some seeds though. Okay, and so I decided, you know what, lots of melon ideas, maybe like eating with family. So I'm going to add that in because I didn't really put that in. And then I'm going to put an example of, he talked about the pancake house. I'm going to even talk about like where we eat out is maybe something else that I want to say. I'm gonna go back here, keep looking. He decided he didn't want to write about watermelon topics. I'm just reading right here. He chose just one teeny tiny seed story. And so he wrote about his son who can't stand vegetables. Oh, I like that. His seeds. So George McClement's seed equals son eating dinner. Okay, so that's his seed. So that's important to me to pull that out because I want them to see that published authors will do that. Now, use a shared class experience to demonstrate picking up just one small story from a big watermelon topic. So I'm just going to read this out to you, and then I'm going to tell you what I did. When you write, you'll want to take lessons from what George has done and ask yourself, wait, is this a watermelon topic? Let's say you decided to write about today in school. Think to yourself, is that a teeny tiny seed story? And then you make the gesture. If I wrote about a big, huge topic like that, my story wouldn't have any details. It might go, we had morning meeting, touched one seed on the watermelon slice, and we went to art class, and we talked about our rabbit, and then he jumped out of the crate. And then Josh's dad came to talk to us about recycling, yada, yada, yada. So the first thing that crossed my mind was students aren't in school right now. So I'm just using our specific example of COVID. And so maybe because students have been out of the class for a while, that's not something that they maybe can connect with, okay? And so I thought to myself, I need to come up with something. And so what I did is I decided to talk about Bo. And then in my notes, I did see iPad so that I had it already prepared for seed ideas, okay? And so that was my watermelon. Seed topic, okay? And then so in my iPad, as you had seen, what I did is that I had this already prepared, okay? So
Can
I
you
have,
just wipe that down?
Sorry?
Yeah.
okay, so I already had that prepared. Now I'm gonna keep going. I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna keep going in here. And then so that's when that piece of writing came. So we can see from George that good story writers take a teeny tiny seed story. I think I'm just going to write about one of those seeds that I saw in my topic. Okay, so then this no longer applies to me. Okay, because I'm not writing about magic jumping out of the crate, I'm writing about my dog Bo. Okay, touch the first page. So I'm going to go back here because that's a strategy. Start with touch and tell, then show writing sample.
And that strategy, she would have had that on the anchor chart. So she probably, when she would teach, she would physically go there. So remind students, bring back their attention to that.
Okay, and then so so here is the example of writing. I already have my example of writing for Bo. Now, debrief, reminding children to pick up just one small story from a big topic they might be inclined to tell. And so when I talked earlier about that debrief piece, that's how you're going to get them to the teaching point, if that's the one thing that you focus on, right? So now I'm going to keep going. Writers, did you see how I had this big watermelon topic filled with all the stories today, but then I picked just one seed story? Now I'm going to ask the children to think of another seed story using the same shared watermelon topic in your demonstration. So that's, so now students try with animal.
Lauren, just let you know, we've got 8 minutes left.
Okay. And then that's, again, I already made my little sheet, ready, story of one of your pets, right? So that's when I decided to use that as my topic. So if I keep going, now they're going to rehearse this by touching and telling across the pages of an imaginary booklet. Think about how your story went, what happened first. Okay, so now pretend you have a booklet with the pages. So that's maybe something that I want to put in there. Students try with animal topic. They need to do touch and tell, because that's a skill that we already did. Going back, after a few minutes, I redirected the students to stop and think. I heard Ronald say. So this is something that I just know to do. I'm going to look for examples while the students are talking. Keep going. Give students repeated practice at identifying seed stories inside of topics. Let's practice finding some seed stories. The topic is playing with a friend. Okay, so continue practice. So play with a friend. Okay. And then the thumbs up, thumbs down things. Yeah, you can read those for sure. Those are things that you're just going to naturally do the more you do this. Okay. That's a good one. Here's another one on topic. Things you like to do in winter. That's not applicable right now. So I did things to do in summer. Okay, there we go. That's my active engagement piece. Keep going. Okay, so now is when we go into the link. So remind writers that when they write narratives, it always helps to pause and ask, is this a watermelon topic? Okay, one thing I could do. Is this a seed story? What is one specific thing I could make a good story? So one specific thing. Okay, now I'm going to go back up and I'm going to take a look at what my connection is. So my connection now is name the work the children have been doing that calls for them to learn a new strategy. When you think about the true stories that you could write, and great big giant topics like life, school. Okay, so now I'm going to go up to my connection piece. The writing currently going on equals big topics. Life, school. They are so big, in fact, that they are just hard to carry like they are to write. Now, here's the example. So it said Jessica's been writing and she's only gotten to the very beginning. Here's the coaching piece that I used. You might want to use yourself as an example in this connection. You could describe how you realized your writing was going on for a whole page. And so you know what? I was like, I don't want to pull one student out right now. I'm not ready to do that. I'm going to use myself. Okay, so these are heavy topics, hard to carry. I write one page, not even the good part. Okay, and now I'm done. So I'm just gonna escape out of here. I'm gonna get back into the presentation.
Now,
So,
obviously, when you do this first, it won't be as quick. Your eyes will be getting used to what to pick through all that lesson plan. Lauren was showing you a very thorough way of doing it. But first, when you do it, it'll get easier. The more you do it, it will get definitely easier. And I think the key point we want to share with you as you plan these mini lessons, you have to make them your own. It has, don't try to copy or to read every word that's in the book. It won't seem authentic.
can you see the planning a mini lesson
Yeah.
slide?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's exactly what Julie said. I didn't know about Magic the Rabbit or whoever that they were giving examples. I'm gonna give something a funny an example that they could maybe relate to. It was my dog, right? And so make it your own. Use the examples that you want. One other thing that we've added here, and again, please just write any questions you want in the chat. Now, we wanted to just show you Gwen. We're going to just send you a link to Gwen. And now Gwen is somebody that can mentor us as a mentor teacher during COVID. So like I said, I took away the classroom example. And so what this teacher is doing is she is teaching her mini lessons online pre-recorded. And so she can do like a flip screen And or not a flip screen, like a side-by-side screen of herself talking, as well as her iPad or whatever she's working on. So we just sent you that link to look at in your own time if you're interested about what a mini lesson could look like online, because we are in sort of, we don't know what September is going to look like. And then as well, how to do that. Jody Moore, our colleague, did it, and I'm flabbergasted that she could figure it out, because I certainly am not tech savvy enough. And hers was incredibly successful. Incredibly successful.
So we've got only 1 minute, and we've shared with you some links. These are shared with you in the email. Is there any questions before we end? As I said, we will, as Lauren said, we'll be on for the next 15 minutes, but is there anything that resonated with you? Is there any questions that came up as you were watching Lauren planning?
And while you're writing those questions in the chat, I'm just going to speak quickly to this. If you go on the reading and writing project, so these are the people that have created the units of study, they have tons of video examples, right? And these are the masters. The people, what's cool here is the people that are demoing the lessons are often the authors that actually wrote these lessons. So you can take a look at that link or even just their website, but there's tons and tons of videos for you to learn and see from other people as well.
And I think what's really powerful about this particular site, Lauren, is the fact that if I want to look at some conferring examples, they have conferring examples in the different genres. So what is that going to look like in the different genres? Or if I want to talk about lesson, I'm going to have some really great exemplars of that, so you can model that your practice after that.
So it is 2:30. Thank you so much for joining us. As Julie said again, if you haven't registered for every session, please do so, because even if you aren't planning on being present for them, you'll at least have the link to the recorded session if it's something that you're interested in doing.
You guys were very quiet today.
I know, it makes me nervous, you guys. I was nervous enough about sharing live that I got no feedback. It's okay.
Maybe it was nap time for maybe it's that time.
After lunch food coma. Yeah, so thanks for joining us. Again, we'll stick around for a little bit if you have questions. We had some really great specific questions from schools yesterday. So thank you so much for coming.
Robin, your face moved. You were not in my top view. I did not know. I was lost without you.
Okay, Julie, can I stop the recording?
Yes.
Stop it.